Hi, everyone. Welcome to Kelly and Tini Talk. And today we're going to be talking about performance coaching. And so we're going to dive right into what makes a coach-player relationship work, one of the fundamentals of any successful coaching relationship. So I'm Tini, and Kelly has been my coach for 30 years.
Wow. Wow.
I was 10 when we started, I think.
Yeah, right. Me too.
All right, so let's dive right in. So, Kelly, what do you think makes it work?
Okay, so I want to begin by saying there is no one, let me say it this way, Teeny. Every coach has a particular point of view and a particular philosophy. And so I don't believe in the cookie cutter notion of what makes a great coach. I believe that a great coach is someone who has credibility, who has produced success. Therefore, they can stand on certainty about having something work. And I believe that great coaches have a very particular point of view. And as you know, that's if you listen to coaches talk, Teeny, they say things like, well, when I do it, or this is the way I like to do it. I think coaching is very personal. And if you listen to people in sports or in the theater or any place, every coach, every director who's kind of a coach in the theater, they have their point of view about how they do it and how they think it works best. So
Mm,
I want to begin with that. That's my first
yeah.
assertion here.
And I love that comparison with theater
Mm,
because what occurs to me is you bring in the artistry.
mm,
There are models in one hand, there are models of coaching, right? So many different models, so many different approaches. And on the other hand, there's the artistry of it. So that's a really nice visual for me.
when you were talking, I was thinking 30 years ago, there weren't any models when you and I started. I mean, I had some models, but now you look 30 years later, every place you look, there is so much information about the right way to coach. There's coaching schools, there's coaching books, there's coaching this. And I think all that's great, but it really is making my point, which is every great coach has their own particular modality, their
Mm.
own particular point of view about it. And I'm then going to say the next assertion I'm going to make about what makes it work. It's going to sound oversimplified, but I want to hear your thoughts on it because I think we agree on this. Is there a connection between the coach and the player? And another way to say that is it all forget the models, forget the how-tos for a moment. If there's no chemistry, then it's going to be a bumpy road.
Mm.
A bumpy road. Now, can I coach people that I don't have chemistry with? I can. Does it produce the same thing I produce with you? Not with you. That was, incorrect thing to say. No, it's not the same. So for me, it's that model that we use relationship versus challenge, which is you can't just show up and start ordering people around like a coach if there's no connection, there's no safety. And at the very simplest of level, Teeny, do you want to talk to your coach? And if the last person in the world you want to talk to is your coach, wow, this is a bumpy road. What do you think?
Oh, totally agree. And I'm as you were talking, I was reminiscing on how and when we first met, right? And so um, I'd love to for us to just before we dive deep into the kind of the different directions this conversation could go, what were your first impressions?
Okay, now I don't want to hurt your feelings. Do you want me to be honest?
Honest, of course.
Okay, so first of all, I heard about you before I met you. And I heard about you from your partner and dear friend, Mark Hempstead, who we lost way too early a couple of years ago. But I remember, and he specifically called me and said, I want you to coach Tini Fadzillah. She's crucial to my organization. She's extremely talented, but I think she could be great. Um, if you can move her through her own insecurity about is she good or not. So I heard about you before I met you. Then I met you, and I'll just be honest with you, Tina. I'm not saying this just because you're here. You dazzled me. You completely seduced me. The very first time I saw you, you were doing a presentation, a public presentation. There's probably 50 people in the room. You were up in front. You hadn't been doing it that long, but when I was watching you, I was like, it's like she's been doing this all her life. Your capacity to connect with people. This is your superpower. The way you can with such ease connect with people. And so honestly, I lost all objectivity at that moment because I just thought, this is the future here. This young woman can be masterful. And the other
Wow.
first impression I had was, you're really funny and you're really down to earth. I mean, you didn't know me. I'm the big Tuta from the United States, and you weren't intimidated by me at all. You were asking me where I got my scarf that I was wearing that day, and wanting to do like girl stuff. And you completely reduced me to this like girlfriend who's talking to you. So what would I say to simplify it? I'd say, I don't know if I got you in relationship with me or you got me in relationship with you, but it was instantaneous. And I'll be honest with you, Tini, that doesn't, as you know, having you've been coaching now for what, how many years? 20 or more?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, as you well know, that doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
Now, you and I both know we need to get a relationship, but sometimes you get lucky and there's a natural chemistry. Doesn't happen very often, but when it does, oh, I'm so grateful for it.
Oh my God. Thank you so much. I'm, when you were talking, I was thinking back the same question to me. What was my first impression of you? And I remember that it's like a movie and they're like scenes, different scenes that stood out for me. And one of the scenes was, I think you walk into the office and so Mark did preempt me. He goes, okay, you're going to meet Kelly. And I just want to highlight, she curses a lot.
I do. If you're listening, audience, I'm sorry, but I'm 79, and there's something really amusing about. And I wasn't 79 then, but even then, I was a lot older than you because I'm older than you. And I don't know why, but I find cursing very cathartic. I really enjoy it.
And so, for just to give a background, so you can imagine, my business partner at the time, Mark Hempstead, is English, so he's very proper, right? And I don't know what I am. I'm ethnically Asian, but I've lived everywhere and very proper, right?
Yeah.
Until I'm not. But anyway, and so here in walks Kelly Poulos for the first time, and she just starts. I mean, she's energetic. The first thing that hits you, she's like a hurricane, right? And she walks in and she's like a hurricane, high energy. Hi, everyone. And curse here, curse there. And then all Mark and I did was look at each other and we went, you know what I'm talking about? The subtext.
Or did that put you off? Like, I mean,
No.
talking about kind of a culture clash there a bit, Teeny. You're talking about, the British culture, the Southeast Asian culture, but although you're international,
Yeah.
you've lived all over the world, but still you grew up in an Asian family, and this so obviously American person in the way I look and the way I talk. How did you feel about that? The fact that you lived in the United States maybe helped you for a little bit because,
Oh,
yeah,
I
yeah,
thought it was refreshing. I thought it was entertaining. And you actually, as I was growing up, um, would always say, Teeny, why are you looking at me like this, like a science experiment?
yeah, exactly. Do you
Remember that?
remember you used to do that with me? You used to just stare at me. I was so self-conscious. I was like, why are you staring at me? So let's address that now, Teeny. Why were you staring at me?
I don't know. Let me think. I just found you so fascinating. I
Hmm.
found you in one hand entertaining. So there's the entertainment, the energy, it's refreshing, fascinating. On the other hand, you definitely know what you're talking about.
Mm.
So when Kelly's talking, not only do I listen, as you know, I'm constantly taking notes. And there's a lot of reminiscing here, but I would take notes, and Kelly would turn around and say to me, Teeny, it's exactly the same thing I've been saying for the last however many years. Why are you taking notes?
Yeah.
I'm like, no, no, I better take notes.
Very interesting. But I think also I do that too. I take notes because it reinforces it in my mind. I can more easily remember it if I'm taking notes, even if I've heard it before. But you're hitting on a point there that we can connect to what we talked about earlier, which is every coach has a particular philosophy, a particular point of view. And one of the things that I'm known for that took you a while to get used to is repetition.
Ah, yes.
And the whole idea, we actually have a a model that we'll share, not in this particular court recording, but later on, rips and reps, repetitive ineffective practices and repetitive effective practices. And I'm a huge fan of repetition. And I'm a huge fan of repetition because if you in fact take this on like a practice day in, day out, week in, week out, you reach a point where it becomes spontaneous. It becomes automatic. And this is one of my goals when I'm working with my clients, working with people like you, is that one day you look up and you don't have to think about it. It's just there. It's
Yeah.
now it's a part of you. But the reason I brought that up is before you really kind of got that, you were one day I was doing so I don't know if it was in Malaysia or Singapore, and I was doing an event. And after the event, you said, that's the same thing you did last time. And I said, yeah, I only do like maybe 9 or 10 things, but I do them repetitively and hopefully with some energy and passion and inspiration. And she said, well, don't you ever get tired of just saying the same thing the same way every time? And I laughed out loud. And first of all, my answer was no, I don't. Because it's my practice now, it's my particular point of view. And B, I think it was the first time you began to see that we weren't seeking new material every time we were talking. Some people seek new stuff all the time. They need new stuff because they think the new content or the new model or the new stuff is what's going to make it work. I don't subscribe to that. I think there are practices that work and practices that don't work. And my goal as a coach and my goal with my players is that they get to the point where the practices that work become spontaneous for them. And that requires repetition. But if you think about it, it took you a while to buy off on that. You weren't sold on that. It took you a while.
Yeah, in the early days for sure. The other memory I have, which I think is really important, is this idea of knowing. So, part of being in a relationship is identifying the keys that might unlock your player.
Mm-hmm.
And the event that like is seared in my memory and my heart was you walked into the office, and just so listeners, for you to know, is Kelly didn't live in Asia, so she lived in the States and would come to Asia in those days maybe 4 times a year, which is crazy, but anyway. And she walked into the office having landed and in that time KL, and she walked in the office with a gorgeous outfit. She was wearing a really nice outfit. And I said, "Oh my God, I love what you're wearing."
I
And she,
remember the outfit. It
yeah,
was a tangerine silk pantsuit, a very
yes,
expensive silk pantsuit. It was gorgeous.
yes. And Kelly said, she paused and she looked at me and she went, "If you hit your target, you can have it." I went, "What? Are you kidding me?" So, how much you want to bet I hit my target?
And
And I got it.
Exactly.
I got the suit. And so that for me, it was such a fun way to incentivize.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of my favorite quotes is of Warren Buffett. People do what they are incentivized to do. And I'd like to tell you that I was all knowing and seeing at that moment. And I thought to myself, oh, this is how to unlock Tini, offer her my suit. Really, it didn't occur to me like that. It didn't. It was just kind of a spontaneous thing. But what it speaks to is the nature, the dance of our relationship. And I want to say relationship because I'm not always coaching you. It's not like if I'm with you for 8 hours in a day, I'm not coaching you for 8 hours. There are times when I'm coaching you and times when we're just together being human beings. And I think that's a distinction I want to make here too, is that um, it doesn't have to be nonstop coaching. A lot happens in just relating. A lot happens when you trust yourself with someone enough to let them know what's going on. And if you think about it, Tini, and I know because you're a corporate and ontological coach, I 100% do performance coaching, but you don't always know people well when you first start coaching with them.
Yep.
And I'm sure that you see that as time goes on and they become more and more at ease with you, you're able to make a bigger contribution with them. Because as a coach, if I don't know what's really going on with you, I can't contribute to you.
Yeah, that's really powerful. So, just to give some kind of a visual, so in traditional coaching gigs, coaching situations, it's a 1 hour session. You see your client, and then after the hour is done, you leave, or the session's complete. The unique situation that, or the kind of relationship that Kelly and I had was she would be visiting Malaysia, for example, during her tour of Asia, and would spend full days with us,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this to me sounds a lot like if you're a leader, for example, working with your team in the same office day in, day out. This is really, 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 there are nuggets here that are really valuable. And also, there are nuggets that you can apply if you are a coach having your one hour sessions with different people.
Yeah, it's exhausting to have somebody coach you 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
I mean, so I'm explicit with that. And I'm a believer in repetition. Another thing I'm a believer in is being explicit. So if I'm coaching you, I'm coaching you because I tell you, look, I'm going to coach you right now. And I say that because I want you to listen to me in the way you would if you were being coached. And if I'm not coaching you, it's like, no, I'm not coaching you now. Let's just go have lunch and relax and talk. So I think that it falls on the coach to create the listening. And sometimes I want my player listening to me like a coach. And sometimes we're not coaching, we're being together and getting to know each other. Now, for some coaches, that's too familiar. It's not for me. That's a personal preference for me. I enjoy getting to know people. And as well as I know you now, some 30 years later, I have no problem switching on a dime saying, whoa, wait a minute. Nope, I need to coach you right now. And I think you can get to the point with someone like that. And we're talking over a long term, which is unusual, Teeny. I would like to point out that not very many people have the same clients for 30 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Most coaches, it's a shorter term prospect than that. But again, we're talking about every coach has a point of view and every coach has a bias. And for better or worse, you're hearing my bias. And I don't like short-term coaching. I do not enjoy transactional coaching. I do not accept requests for a one-off coaching session because someone's got an emergency or a problem. I just won't do it.
What's the difference to you?
Well, the difference to me is I want to grow something.
Mm.
What I'm compelled by is getting in a long-term relationship with somebody like you, good times, bad times, but over time, we grow something.
Mm.
Transactional is, just as it sounds, a one-off um, diagnosis and recommendation to solve the specific problem. Some people would call that troubleshooting. There are coaches who enjoy that. And again, that's their point of view. I don't enjoy it. I have clients, including you and many others in Asia and the United States, that I have literally had for 30 years. And you might say, well, well, what do you have to say that's different over 30 years? That's not the point. It's not that you're saying something different. It's that you are current because you're still in the journey with somebody. And in the journey with somebody, things are always changing.
Yeah.
So we're always trying to figure out what's happening right now and what's our best strategy to move forward. So
Yeah.
again, point of view. Now, with that said, I think there's a high demand for what you do and TWP on the ontological side of short-term coaching for corporate managers and executives. I think that there's a demand for that.
Yeah.
Again, just a different modality, really.
Yeah, one of the things that's occurring for me is this idea of w one of the distinctions of what makes a great coach is, I mean, so many things. One of it is the capacity to connect dots,
Mm,
right?
mm,
And we're talking 30 years in reference to you and we are talking maybe 6 sessions, which is also possible for some of my clients. And my capacity as a coach, your capacity as a coach to connect the dots over 30 years. Tini, do you remember when we first started the company?
mm,
And to remind me,
mm,
and I go, oh my God, I totally forgot about that.
mhm.
And then in 6 sessions, same thing. Connect the themes, connect the dots, and be a mirror, because that doesn't change, right?
Yeah, and I think that what people forget, because you can't, what's the value of a coach? End of the day, it's really simple. You can't see yourself in action. I mean, that in a nutshell, that's it, Teeny. It's that outside set of eyes that can see, and it's so obvious to you. And when you're in it, it's not so obvious. But one of my experiences is because people are in it, like, let me just do you. When you began, you were very talented woman, very talented, who was not at all confident internally. Now, people are going to find that funny that know you, because 30 years later, that certainly is not who you are in the world. And you were so talented that almost nobody could see that insecurity. That insecurity showed up in you, not in the execution. You're very interesting in that you could always execute. You could always do that presentation. You could always run that meeting. You could always drive a team. It was the internal experience that they couldn't see that you were having, which was about doubting whether or not you were good enough to get this done. And therefore, you were an easy mark for controlling people. Do you remember that? And
Uh-huh.
I think it took, and by easy mark, I mean they could trigger your doubt rather quickly. So somebody who was kind of controlling could say to you, well, Tini, I don't think the way you did that was really the right way. I think you should do it this way. And in your beginner stage there, your default would be to go to, okay, maybe they're right. Maybe I need to change that. Maybe that's not the right way to do that. Your default was to believe them and doubt your own um, certainty, because you didn't have the certainty yet.
Right.
But what happens is over time, you certainly are not that today. I mean, you are, in fact, a certified master coach. But what happens is because you're in it and you're growing through it, now you're working with other people, and you and I have had this discussion here lately. You forget who you were when you were a beginner and how you wanted to be related to so that you could find that certainty. And I think that's one of the very first benchmarks for elite performance, Tini, is a rock hard certainty that I can and will get this done.
Even if I didn't know how to, that's secondary.
Especially if I don't know how. I mean, to me, that's the breakthrough for my clients. I have a little model that I use. If we have time, I'll show it. If not, we'll do it at our next recording. But the value of having coach for you was you were able to execute and produce results and continue to work through and find the source of your own belief in yourself and your own certainty. And the value of a coach in that cycle is that you may not have certainty, but your coach does. And if you trust your coach, you can drive from their certainty. Does that make any sense?
Totally.
If
Totally.
if I look at you and say, Teeny, listen to me, this will work, you know that I'm not BSing you. That I wouldn't tell you something was going to work if it wasn't going to work. Now, do we always win that way? No, but it gives us our very best chance. So now, once you get to the other side of it, where you have these spontaneous, effective practices and you're working with your team and they haven't had a coach for 30 years like you have, if you don't drop down from spontaneous and unconscious competency down to conscious, the way in which you relate to them will just be critical. And you cannot increase capacity if you can't meet people where they are. I don't know why I went off on that tangent, but I did.
I think that's so valuable,
So
though.
is there anything there for you?
No, I think that's so valuable because what's coming to my mind are the leaders that I work with. So, we may not be calling them coaches with their team, but they can bring in the coaching approach. And what I'm extracting from what you're saying is you need to be in relationship. Relationship is really important with your players. In order for you to start to challenge, both of them need to coexist equally.
Oh, for sure. You can't, you challenge without relationships resistance. Nothing will happen. Everybody who's listening to this has had a boss that might have been really smart, but they were so controlling and so critical that you just couldn't even stand to be around them. So you certainly can't be coached by them, in my opinion, in any way that would increase your capacity. Now, when we say relationship, I think we should point out that doesn't mean that I'm telling you my deepest, darkest secrets and you're telling me your deepest, darkest secrets. Relationship in the way I'm talking about it here is a tone, is a connection, is an invitation, is a curiosity, Teeny. I think people who are good at relationship are curious about other people. And I'm curious about other people. It's not a technique for me, but because it's really you and I share a capacity for relating. It's one of our lucky gifts. But if you don't have a capacity for relating, you can learn how to relate. Learning how to relate is a skill, and you can get better at it. But I work a lot in Northeast Asia too, not just Southeast Asia, and especially you see this in the Chinese culture. And in the Chinese culture, they call this guanqi. Guanqi is relationship, but not in the way that Americans mean it, like I know you, you know me, or you're my father, you're my cousin. No, it's deeper than that for them. They say everything begins from guanqi. So as an American, I had to learn about that, because our culturally, we just come in like a bull and go right to business. And Asians are generally very polite, and so they don't say anything to us, but they don't want to talk to us again. So the whole idea that everything begins in relationship is just the way I am interested in you. And I think as a coach, if you look back on it, Tini, we know each other really well now, but when we started, you just do it a little bit at a time. This is why I don't like transactional coaching. One of them. The first is I want to grow something. Second, I can't get to know you in a one-off situation. I'm a troubleshooter there. But over time, our relationship grows, and we've got enough experience to know if we trust each other or not. Have we kept our agreements with each other over time? Have we delivered the goods through our partnership over time? And because of that, it becomes easier and easier to find the source of the next great problem solving strategy. It becomes easier and easier.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It's really it's kind of cool to be able to for us to be connecting the dots of history to now and bring it to like the bigger picture. I'm just curious, what do you think about in general? Do you think everyone needs a coach?
Well, it depends on what they're committed to be honest with you, T. So I think anybody who's committed to excelling in any field absolutely needs a coach. Now, maybe that's not that important to you. If one of the great, my favorite business books is Good to Great. And the great quote from that is the enemy of greatness is good, because most people are satisfied with good. That's, you know, the truth. But if you're somebody who aspires to greatness, to excellence, to mastering something, you will never get there in the same amount of time and, frankly, fulfillment that you will with a coach. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I totally agree with you. One of the thoughts that I'm having now is what you just said, because a coach brings the mirror,
Mm-hmm.
the metaphor of a mirror, right? And so the coach brings the opportunity for the player to be able to look in the mirror and see things that they couldn't see when they're just the only one in the trenches. They're the
Oh,
ones in the
sure.
trenches, right?
Yeah.
And just that simplicity in terms of the kind of the visual
Mm-hmm.
is that alone is really, really powerful because we have so many blind spots.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, because we're human beings. Condition normal,
Yeah.
condition normal. And I want to reiterate, it depends on what they're committed to. Because if you're not, if you're just doing this, and what you, it's okay with you, you get what you get. You don't need a coach. But if you're somebody that wants to really do well, you're be real smart, real smart. It would be an advantageous move to have a coach. See, in my practice, and again, every coach I think has a point of view, and great coaches have a practice. They have a set of models and a philosophy. And I have a philosophy and a set of models that have evolved over time. But the power of that is that you get to experience whether or not you're in alignment with your coach or not, because they have a specific point of view. And if you're not in alignment, you should find another coach. So I've had clients where it just didn't work. No problem. Just didn't work. They're just I had a really talented woman I was working with, and she just didn't buy my philosophy and my practices. She just couldn't buy it. And so we parted ways, and it's really no big deal. There has to be a natural kind of chemistry there, and a belief in what the coach is saying. But that can only happen, Teeny, if the coach is clear about what their particular philosophy and practices are. So part of being a great coach is being clear about what you believe in, clear about what you think works, and standing on it so that somebody can say yes or no. That certainty increases capacity. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Oh, yeah, of course. So what, therefore, what makes a great player?
What they're committed to.
Yeah. I'm thinking
Yeah.
this is equally true for sports too,
Oh,
isn't it?
sure.
It's not just
Of course.
performance.
Of course. We learn so much. I mean, so much of what we know about coaching in today's world where everybody's a coach comes from sports, comes from athletics, and comes from the theater, as well. But absolutely, we are drawing on the mindset. You'll hear athletic coaches talk about the mindset of a champion. And if you listen to them, you can listen to 20 of them, very similar characteristics, which is they're committed to greatness, they're committed to excellence, they're coachable, they execute, they do the work, they practice. If their coach asks them to do something, they do it. So there is a mindset that generates practice. I have a particular bias about the mindset I'm listening for. And the mindset I'm listening for is a commitment to greatness, a connection with why it matters to you, an emotional connection. Absolutely my experience, Tini, that there's a huge difference between somebody who is intellectually committed to something and somebody who is emotionally connected to it and it matters to them. And why that matters to me as the coach is my commitment is your commitment. I know that sounds like psychobabble, but the truth is what I'm committed to is what you're committed to. And if you aren't clear about that, I cannot contribute to you. And why that's important is, as you know, if you're going from here to there, there's a lot of bumps in the road between here and there. And so commitment is the source of power there to get through the inevitable breakdowns, upsets, and misses. So between here and there, we're going to win, we're going to lose, we're going to learn from both. What keeps us in the game is an emotional connection to what we're committed to. Otherwise, the first time we get our ass kicked, we're out.
I love that. I love how the work that you and I do are not is it's life. It shows up everywhere. I'm going to even suggest it shows up in who I am as a parent. Who I am as a parent, sports, theater, business,
Oh,
leaders.
for sure. For sure. Absolutely, for sure. Yeah. We need to wrap this up. It's so good, but
Good.
yeah, it's good, but we went over. So let's stop here, Teeny, and
Okay.
and do part B because I don't want to launch. So what I want to do in part B is I've got a map here. Let me. All right. So just say something to say, and the part B will be coming soon, and I'll edit the rest of it out.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start to wrap this up. What a juicy conversation. Yes, it was really, really juicy. Thank you for that. So we're going to wrap this up and stay tuned for part B of this conversation.
It was great, Teeny.